I never imagined that the quiet aftermath of a life-shattering betrayal would morph into a full-blown family battleground. At 46, with the weight of 23 years of marriage, once my sanctuary with Lydia, my college sweetheart, we were crumbling under secrets and lies. I discovered, quite by accident, a string of furtive messages on her phone. Lydia had been entangled with her suave supervisor, Alan. There was no room for denials or excuses when the truth bled through in stark clarity. In a single, heart-wrenching moment, I realized that I was now a man forced to rebuild a life from the ruins of trust. I explained everything to Erica, my 21-year-old daughter, with a raw honesty that I believed would empower her. But instead of rallying to the side of truth, she recoiled, drawn like a moth to a financially glittering flame. When she learned of Alan's affluence, she seemed to trade loyalty for security, cutting me off completely. For a month, silence reigned like a cold winter night, until one afternoon, her knock shattered that barren quiet. Freshly graduated yet strangely distant, she'd missed her own ceremony, and for an entire month, her voice had been absent. Erica pleaded with tear-stained eyes to be let back in. I was furious, hurt, and, against my better judgment, I let her back into the home we still shared. It wasn't long before the air turned acrid with new ambitions. Ever since childhood, Erica had nurtured a secret passion for baking, a craft she had pursued to the point of obtaining a business degree, dreaming of owning a bustling bakery. Despite the counsel Lydia and I offered, advice to first learn under the tutelage of an experienced baker, she was impatient. In a furtive bid to jumpstart her dream, she had approached Alan behind her mother's back, hoping he would invest in her bakery venture. When Alan hesitated and eventually spilled the details to Lydia, a bitter clash ensued. Erica's loyalty fractured further. She severed ties with Lydia and turned to me, as if I were her last remaining refuge in a world that had become relentlessly cruel. Reluctantly, I acquiesced. I allowed her to move in, though every step of the process stung. To safeguard my heart and my savings, I insisted on a formal agreement. Erica would first hone her skills under a professional's guidance before she could take the entrepreneurial leap. I drafted a legal contract, a desperate shield against the impulsiveness I knew all too well in her. The conversation that day was laced with bitter tension. She agreed, though her tone betrayed the simmering rebellion within. Before long, the everyday demands began. Erica's requests for money grew as constant as the ticking of a clock. One day, in a moment of trust and hope for her responsible independence, I handed her my spare debit card, a card linked to a savings account that held $225,000, a nest egg meticulously built to allow me an early retirement from a desk job that had become intolerable because of a relentless carpal tunnel syndrome. I warned her gently, use it for necessities, and return it once you could stand on your own 2 feet. For a while, her updates painted a picture of responsible progress. At dinner, she'd recount her new job at a reputable bakery, the modest earnings that seemed to justify her newfound independence. I believed her until one fateful day. A routine check of my account turned into a nightmare. The numbers that once promised a secure future were now a cruel mockery. Only $3,000 remained. My heart pounded as I scrolled through transaction histories that revealed a trail of expenditures, high rents for a store in the trendiest part of the city, lavish spending on ingredients, and even nights out that were anything but frugal. Every cent of my carefully guarded savings had been funneled into her reckless venture, violating every word of our agreement. My hands trembled as I called her, demanding an explanation. Over the phone, her tone shifted from defiant to defensive. With a mix of fevered excitement and exasperated justification, she confessed that she'd simply been too impatient to labor under someone else's supervision. The bakery, she claimed, was her destiny, a calling that couldn't wait for the slow pace of apprenticeship. In that moment, my anger roiled like a storm, and I issued an ultimatum: shut the business down immediately and return every misused dollar. But as our voices escalated into a cacophony of hurt and fury, Erica's facade crumbled into tears. Amidst her crying, she declared that she'd find solace and support with her mother, where, she argued, even imperfection was preferable to my stern demands. And just like that, she left, abandoning me in the midst of a legal and emotional quagmire barely a week after our divorce was finalized. The legal papers I filed against her were a bitter necessity. I couldn't watch as my retirement funds vanished into a dream that, in my eyes, had been built on betrayal. Yet every time my phone buzzed, it carried another sting. Lydia, whose own share of betrayal had cut me deeply, began a relentless barrage of texts condemning my actions, calling me a terrible father. Her words, sharp and unyielding, dredged up feelings of guilt and regret that I thought had long since faded. I tried to block out the noise, but Erica's own messages soon followed, a ceaseless stream of guilt trips and manipulative pleas that questioned my every decision. A week later, a new chapter in this twisted saga unfolded. Erica's lawyer reached out with a proposal: settle the case by paying back a paltry sum of $10,000 up front, with the remainder spread out over a series of installments. The offer felt like a betrayal in itself, a final twist that suggested even the smallest repayment was tainted by the influence of Alan's financial power. I was torn. On one hand, the thought of dragging this dispute into a lengthy court battle filled me with dread. On the other, accepting such an arrangement would feel like surrendering to a narrative that painted me as the villain. My attorney urged negotiation, but deep down, every fiber of my being screamed that I was already losing more than money. I was losing the remnants of trust and respect in my own family. As if the legal maze wasn't enough, the digital world soon joined the fray. Social media became a battleground where Lydia and Erica painted a portrait of a heartless, absent father. Cryptic posts and sardonic captions splashed across feeds, hinting at my failings and inviting scorn from every corner of my network. I blocked Lydia to silence the constant barrage, yet Erica's texts persisted, each one a calculated effort to guilt me into submission. Just yesterday, one message in particular cut through the noise, a smug announcement that she had terminated the lease on her store and would soon abandon her ill-fated business, all while asking if I was, in some twisted way, pleased by the turn of events. It was a manipulation so artfully cruel that I could only sit in stunned silence, realizing that the very people I had once loved now wielded my vulnerabilities as weapons. Then, on a night when I craved nothing more than solitude after a grueling day at work, fate delivered one final blow. I arrived home under the cloak of midnight, only to find Lydia and Alan waiting on my doorstep, their presence as intrusive as a sudden summer storm. The porch light barely illuminated their anxious faces as they insisted on speaking with me about something important. I braced myself as they stepped into my modest living room, a surreal scene that felt ripped from a dark drama. Alan, surprisingly affable in his attempt at small talk, soon steered the conversation toward the crux of our mutual dilemma, the funds I had lost, and the possibility of settling the matter. In a twist that felt both bitter and bizarre, they explained that Alan, who now faced his own financial strains, with a son nearing college and an older daughter preparing for marriage, proposed a deal. Instead of a lump sum payment, he suggested that I accept $10,000 now, with the remainder trickling in over time. It was a verbal accord, forged in the half-light of that midnight meeting, more an act of damage control than a fair settlement. Alan then asked to speak with me alone. Once Lydia had quietly exited, he sat back down and, with a weight of remorse that belied his earlier confidence, offered a half apology. He admitted that Lydia hadn't been entirely honest with him about the circumstances, and that his involvement had been muddled by a desperate need to escape his own unhappiness. I listened, my emotions swirling like smoke in the dim room, conflicted, tired, and strangely sympathetic despite everything. The following day, I found myself in a sterile, sunlit conference room for what was meant to be the final negotiation with Erica and her legal representative. The atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Erica sat across from me with an icy detachment that made her seem less like my daughter and more like a distant, unrecognizable stranger. I demanded that she repay the full amount siphoned from my retirement savings, but her lawyers measured counteroffers, hinting at $110,000 in total, starting with $10,000 immediately, felt like yet another betrayal. Every word exchanged was laced with legalese and emotion, a far cry from the simple family dinner conversations we once shared. Throughout the meeting, Erica's eyes remained fixed on some distant horizon, her tone flat and unyielding. There was no trace of the vibrant young baker I remembered. Instead, I saw someone hardened by ambition and defiance, someone who had severed the emotional cord between us. When the session finally ended, I watched as she was whisked away by a companion in a sleek car, both of them casting scornful, disdainful glances in my direction. I longed to call out, to unleash a torrent of reproof for the betrayal I felt, but the moment passed, swallowed by the cold efficiency of legal finality. Returning home, I hoped for some semblance of resolution, a closure that might stitch together the raw edges of my shattered heart. Instead, my phone buzzed incessantly. Erica had unblocked me and sent a final, venom-laced message declaring that she was relieved never to see me again. She painted me as a terrible father, a failed husband, and the architect of her ruined business dreams, alleging that with Alan's newfound influence, her future was secured, while mine was left in tatters. Her words, dripping with manipulated sorrow and harsh judgment, left me reeling. How had our love and trust disintegrated into such a bitter, relentless litany of recriminations? In that agonizing moment, I realized that the wounds were too deep to be mended by apologies, legal settlements, or even time. I was left at a crossroads, burdened not only by the loss of my retirement fund but by the heavy, inescapable sorrow of a fractured family. Every cent I had saved, every hope I had nurtured for a quiet, dignified retirement, was now entangled in a labyrinth of broken promises and shattered bonds. I questioned whether a father could ever reclaim his dignity after witnessing such profound betrayal. Now, as I stand amidst the wreckage of dreams and the echoes of manipulative texts, I know that the journey ahead will be long and fraught with solitude. I must reclaim the parts of myself that were lost to anger and grief. I must learn to live again, free from the manipulative grip of those who once called themselves family, and from the relentless pull of a past that refuses to fade quietly into memory. Even as I prepare for further negotiations, a tentative agreement of $10,000 now and incremental payments later, I realize that no sum of money can ever restore what has been irreparably broken. The scars of betrayal, of a daughter's reckless ambition and a wife's deceit, will linger as painful reminders of trust misplaced. Yet, within this crucible of despair, I feel a fragile ember of resolve flicker. I owe it to myself to step forward into a future defined not by the misdeeds of the past, but by the promise of my own renewal. And so, with each passing day, as I navigate court dates and cold conversations, I find myself asking, can a father truly heal from such profound betrayal? Can the echoes of broken promises ever be silenced? Even as I resolve to live my life on my own terms, traveling, working, and reclaiming the quiet dignity of solitude, I know that the answers lie buried in time and in the quiet strength of a heart that refuses to be defined solely by its pain. In the end, my story is not just one of financial ruin or legal battles, it is the story of a man determined to rise from the ashes of deceit, to rediscover a hope that had once been snuffed out by betrayal. With every painful memory etched into my soul, I step forward, uncertain yet resolute, into a future where my own well-being comes first, and where the ghosts of a fractured family will no longer dictate the terms of my life. What remains now is the question, as I forge this new path alone, can I ever truly escape the shadow of those who have wronged me? The night is dark and full of echoes, but somewhere beyond the horizon, I sense the faint light of redemption beckoning me onward.